Okay, in this talk, I discussed the 7th experiment of my PhD dissertation in which I evaluated the performance of eye trackers in 2 head-mounted displays. How is this study pertinent to the dissertation, and why do we care about eye tracking data quality more generally? Well, while eye tracking manufacturers typically provide specifications at a minimum accuracy of their devices, these values are recorded under ideal lab conditions, and they can be a poor indicator of the actual performance of an eye tracker in the wild, which is typically much worse. And overestimating the data quality of an eye tracker can cause problems for really any eye tracking application. And for gaze contingent rendering applications, like the vision simulation described in this dissertation, understanding data quality is really important for determining if the system can quickly and correctly align with where a person is looking at in the display. Ergo, in my 7th study, conducted data quality assessments in the HTC Vive Pro I and the Vario XR3. In this assessment, evaluated 3 of the most common measures of eye tracking data quality, which are accuracy, so how close is an estimated gaze position to the actual gaze position of a user; precision, which is the reproducibility of a gaze position from one sample to the next when gaze position is assumed stable; and 3, data loss, which refers to the percentage or portion of samples during which no gaze coordinate was reported by the system. And there are several methods for measuring eye tracking precision. We report both standard deviation and root mean square of sample-to-sample distances, and then we formally analyze the RMS S2S. So the assessment consisted of 2 phases. First, calibration, then validation, because before using an eye track system, you need to calibrate it to your eyes. The calibration essentially maps your gaze position to the screen by having you fixate at one or several points on the screen. Generally, the more fixation targets you employ during calibration, the better your calibration will be. And to ensure fair comparison, in this assessment, we employed the native 5-point calibrations for both systems. And here you could see the screen grab of the calibration for the HTC Vive Pro I. As we watch, we can see each target is displayed for 1 second in a rectangular layout, and the sequence automatically progresses. So our validation procedure is really similar. However, we evaluated 9 fixation targets, and we used a circular layout. Each target was shown for 3 seconds, and they were presented twice and in a pseudo-randomized order that prevented immediate targets from repeating. Another difference is that we relied on user input to ensure that participants moved their gaze to a target before we started recording their data. Prior research has shown that this approach is more effective than fully automated approaches. And in total, 22 participants volunteered for this experiment. So to better interpret our results, we employed generalized linear mixed models for statistical analyses of accuracy and precision data. Both of these assessments employed the same predictors, the formula for which you can see here. However, precision data was 0 inflated, largely thanks to the Vario. So for precision data, we actually employed a 0 inflated generalized linear mixed model fit with a gamma distribution and a log-link function. Okay, so what did we find? So the mean accuracy across all experimental trials was 1.01 degrees in the Vario and 1.77 degrees for the Vive. We reported a main effect of device in which gaze position offsets were 0.77 degrees larger in the HTC Vive Pro I than in the Vario XR3, so Vario was more accurate. As for order, there was also a very small but significant effect of order in which accuracy was better by 0.03 degrees on average in the second block of experimental trials. Originally, we did also look at device by order interactions, but this was removed in the final version of the analysis because it did not improve model fit. How about our targets? Well, it's well documented that with display-based eye trackers, generally, accuracy and precision decrease as gaze eccentricity increases from the center of the screen. We can see this trend in our main effects of target position, in which accuracy was better at the center target than for any of the other targets, except for the one on the top. But really, these main effects aren't super meaningful because they ignore the impact of device. And you better believe that these systems will perform differently at different sections of the screen. This happens for reasons including, the position of the eye tracking cameras within the display chassis. Out this force plot with the estimates for each target here on the right below me. For the Vive, accuracy was significantly different between the center target and all 8 other fixation targets. And it was more accurate than 6 of them, and it was less accurate than 2 of them, both of which were near the top of the display. Accuracy at the center target was significantly different from 5 of the other fixation targets. It was more accurate than 4 of them, and it was less accurate than 1 of them. I like this plot because it really showcases the disparity in performance between the two systems. There is no overlap between the measurements between the Vive and the Vario here. It also gives us a visual indication that the eye tracking accuracy in the Vario is much more consistent across the display screen than the HTC Vive is. But what about precision? So root mean square precision across all targets was 0.08 in the Vive and 0.01 degrees in the Vario XR3. We report a main effect of device in which precision was significantly worse in the HTC Vive Pro I. Also, now you get a glimpse of the zero inflated data. Okay, so for order, we found it was a similar effect to what we observed with accuracy, where there was a small but significant effect of order. If you're curious about the distance between those two means, it's 0.005, so quite small. Another way we can tell that it's a small effect is that the beta coefficient is near 1, because keep in mind we use the log link function for our precision data. Is back. This time we plot the mean ratios from our mixed model for easy interpretation. So for the Vive, precision was significantly more precise at the center target than for 7 of the other 8 fixation targets. Precision at the center target was significantly different from only 3 of the other fixation targets. It was more precise than the top left and left targets, and it was significantly less precise than 1 of them, which was the bottom right. For data loss, we counted samples as invalid when either the left, the right, or the combined eye sample was marked as invalid, which is technically marked as false for the HTC Vive and invalid in the labeling system for the Vario. With this criteria, we measured 6.28% data loss for the Vive and 6.10% data loss for the Vario. We didn't statistically analyze the eye tracking data loss between these two devices because they use quite different reporting mechanisms, but there's a lot that we can glean from the labeling system in the Vario in particular. Most eye tracking, basically all eye tracking displays actually use some form of filtering and a lot of processing to ensure that data is not terribly noisy. But we often don't have insights into this, and we can see this coming into play here, where the Vive is just giving us binary states, essentially. In contrast, the Vario is still a bit of a black box, but we have more insight into the different tracking states. And this can actually be really informative for future eye tracking data quality studies to consider, because we might anticipate that the compensated state, for example, or visible, has lower eye tracking data quality. Here is that accuracy and precision were better in the Vario XR3. But how do they do compared to manufacturer specs? Well, the Vario was surprisingly comparable. The Vario manufacturers, they reported 1 degree of accuracy, and we measured 1.01 degree of accuracy. In comparison, the Vive was notably worse, with 1.77 degrees in comparison to the expected range of 0.5 to 1.1 degrees. And this is even after, in the manufacturer specs, I should say, they only assess and report these values within the center 20 degrees field of view, which is what we evaluated, and we were still off. And how does our work compare to prior research? So with Vario, it's a bit harder to compare because so few of their displays have been evaluated. And most of the published or pseudo-published work out there is a bit less formal. And then again, we're the first display to evaluate the Vario XR3, so we can't make as direct comparisons. In comparison, the Vive has a growing body of literature at this point that we can compare against. And the values we report here are within the range reported by prior studies. So for example, for Sapachin et al., they found the largest errors in accuracy, which they also sampled the largest area of the screen. But within the centermost points, they reported, in their evaluation, they reported 2.2 degrees accuracy. And then more recently, Schwitz et al., about the same time, Schwitz et al. Also reported accuracies depending on data processing and the field of view between 1.22 degrees and 0.97 degrees. So our values fall kind of in the range of these. There's also been some more or less formal evaluations as well that I discussed in further detail in the paper. Our work is not without limitations. One, we evaluated eye tracking data quality immediately after calibration to get kind of a good initial feel of the data quality in these devices. However, in more realistic applications, people are moving, they're looking around. This is a head-mounted eye tracker and a head-mounted display. You will experience slippage, and eye tracking data quality will deteriorate over time. A second limitation is that we evaluated eye tracking on only a dark background. In that sense, this assessment was actually a bit easier for these systems because your pupils are larger against dark background. So sometimes people will recommend calibration procedures or validation protocols for eye tracking data quality be done against backdrops of different luminance values. One example of this is the Apple Vision Pro eye tracking calibration procedure, if you have experienced that. That's why they do it. Third limitation, automatic IPD adjustment. Guess what those systems use to measure your IPD? That's right, they use eye tracking. Which, you know, if you think your eye tracker has a problem, perhaps you should consider manually adjusting IPD, because there's going to be errors in the eye tracker. So if you really care about IPD, or if you think IPD might be important for eye tracking data in your study, yes. At the start of this talk, I mentioned the importance of understanding eye tracking devices' capabilities and limitations, right? So we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater here, just because the Vive Pro Eye had lower data quality than the Vario XR3 in our study. The Vive Pro Eye is a perfectly adequate device for many eye tracking applications. And the important thing here is that we try to understand the limitations of these devices so we can better design appropriate applications for them. So an example of this in practice is a work by, for example, Schwitz et al. From 2020. And yes, this is the same Schwitz from earlier, but this is a different paper. So Schwitz et al. Developed a psychophysics, for example, developed a psychophysics-inspired model to estimate what target size was needed for reliable gaze selection using an eye tracker based on, you guessed it, eye tracking data quality. So they looked at offsets, they looked at noise for precision, and they looked at sampling rates as well. And this kind of research is not uncommon, and methods vary from very simple to vibes-based to quite complex. And in a similar way, we can use the eye tracking data quality assessments from our own work and from prior research to make a more informed decision about how, for example, a simulated central scotoma should be. Which brings us finally to the 8th study of the dissertation.